Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you come along to try it with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks like our weekly after party videos, consider becoming a paid subscriber. And now, on to this week's adventure.
Axel Bouchon, welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod. We are very happy to have you here. This is my co-host, Tasha.
Happy to have you here.
My name is
fellow
Jeff.
German.
Good to have you.
And we just went crazy getting all excited chatting with you before our podcast about how phenomenally interesting this next hour is going to be. So we know what to expect. Our listeners do not. So can you say a little bit about yourself, your background, and by way of getting into this subject that we're going to explore together and ultimately the practice?
Yeah, you said it already. I'm Axel. I'm basically a neuroscientist by training, and I basically like 20 years desperately trying to find treatments and cures for depression in a way. Simply because I believe depression is, I call it the worst disease. Just imagine you cannot enjoy life. I think feels like horrible. And I was not successful for 20 years. So that's kind of just the starting point of that journey. Trying to understand all the theory, tried to build companies in biotech and pharma, up to the point that I had like a set of personal implications that kind of made me a patient becoming depressed. And definitely never want to go back there. That was kind of just very clear what it is. But it also revealed one thing I did not understand as the scientist. And that is, I realized you most probably cannot cure depression because your brain is built to remember. And you will not forget the worst things in your life. So in a way, I realized that I was almost like 40 years running for the wrong idea that I can cure depression. And realized, no, the only way to really get something in your hands against depression is to keep the happy people happy. So in a way, a prevention is possible, whereas a treatment or a cure might be very, very difficult. So therefore, it doesn't mean that you are sick and always depressed, but kind of this memory of a depression or this memory being not in good shape is kind of just staying with you and forms your life. So this was the origin to think through on how could I find the source code for happiness. And as a scientist, and this is like the thing is that the source code is always molecules, right? So it's actually interesting. If you look at life, molecules are actually only a few that are selected, right? And interestingly, for emotions, there are 6 in particular important neurotransmitters that mediate your positive emotions. And the beauty of this is they have been hanging around for roughly 1 billion years because they are so successful that through evolution, they were always selected as, oh, let's keep this. This feels good, right? So apparently feeling good and progress of life have been tied very tightly together. And before we go to practice, I just very briefly explain how these 6 neurotransmitters and the emotions tie together. And then I think we just go and see how that works in our brain together.
Yeah, because the core insight when I was looking over your materials, and you have a great little video about this, it's that we in the West traditionally have 1 or 2 kinds of happiness that we think we will make money, we're successful, that's gonna make us happy. But that's really only 1 or 2 of these neurotransmitters, that there are actually these different flavors of happiness or fulfillment that the different neurotransmitters basically support. And that if we have a more well-rounded life with more of those activities, then we're talking about true fulfillment. So you're going to lay these out for us, but also how fascinating different ways that they interact and the ways to balance them and all of that. So
But perhaps I just jump right in and kind of go quickly through evolution, because that's always like, in a way, the test and competition bed of all molecules, right? If you're a good molecule, you stay. If you're not really good you're not staying, right? So that's why we have only a couple of 100 molecules that are actually building everything. So it's quite a well selection over these 1 billion years. So in a way, everything started with dopamine, what is kind of giving motivation and enthusiasm. primarily to find food. So if you kind of just look into how that continued when there was the split on actually supporting taking energy for sexual reproduction instead of finding food, right? You need some benefit of this. And the benefit was very clear. It's like mixing genes makes you more successful. So therefore, the second neurotransmitter is testosterone. That's very important together with being excited. So only dopamine and testosterone together give you the feeling of sexual desire. And then if you all of a sudden have a choice, it's extremely beneficial for you if you feel recognized or if you recognize people and you actually take care of yourself, that you are chosen. So in a way, the whole thing of status that we experience in our life up to today is the consequence of a molecule called serotonin that together with dopamine, again, the motivation, gives you recognition and pride. So these are the competitive 3 neurotransmitters that are just kind of in a way selfish, looking on yourself. The interesting thing is that with the onset of mammals, a new molecule showed up called oxytocin that gives us the impression of family love. Because without that, we would not take care 40, 50 years of our kids. There's no energy reason for it other than the reward of feeling family love. So the success of the mammals as such is actually really only, perhaps clearly exaggerated, but actually that molecule that kind of just gives you the power to educate, to raise, to protect your family and kind of just expand it. And it's interesting, it's kind of more successful in terms of how long you actually live, because you see the mammals actually having quite long lifetimes. If you look at humans, now we're coming to the higher mammals. We are more than family, right? We are friends, we are communities, we are living in cities. Crazy, right? I mean, so in a way, you are kind of just the entire form how we live as humans would not be driven by dopamine, not by testosterone, really, not by serotonin, not by oxytocin. But there's another one that is called cannabinoids, or our endogenous ones, the endocannabinoids, that give us the impression of friendship love. That is kind of just why all of a sudden you two guys sit there and enjoy each other, right? You're not family. I kind of just enjoy with you, right? This is pure cannabinoids. That's interesting. That's like has nothing to do. We are motivated, right? So in a way, cannabinoids and dopamine motivation gives us, we feel belonging, friendship. The last one and the youngest one is basically opioids or endorphins that are more or less together with dopamine give you the impression of pleasure and gratitude. And now we have these 9 emotions and 6 neurotransmitters. And what we were interested in was like, hey, if that is true, that it's these 6 plus 9, then we should see something in our brain to happen if I stimulate exactly these emotions and these molecules. And that's why we just invited a lot of people into functional magnetic resonance imaging, so fMRI, and we kind of just exposed them to their personal memories. And then we measured where in their brain the areas were lighting up. And that is actually the exercise I would like to do today. It's like almost like repeating the clinical study that we have done and switching on the highlights. And I can even show you a little bit where they are in your brain, kind of switching on a few of these areas that are, and that's the beauty of it, also linked to people reporting themselves being happier, number one, having less mental disease, very interesting, and actually living the longest. So these areas are tied to something what we actually all are running for. So that's the beauty.
So we're going to do a tour through our own brains of a few neurotransmitters and the specific form of happiness that it evokes in us. And after we do this tour and kind of unpack that, we'll talk about why it matters and how to tweak your life so that more of the good, chemicals are sloshing through your brain.
Exactly. And I think let's perhaps just jump into the first one. Very short introduction to our brain. Our brain is a database, but it has a special way on how it records the memories. So in contrast to a normal photo album where you can look at every photo, this is not how our brain works. And our brain, if you would ask you, hey, show me all your memories, you cannot find a single one. And the reason is our brain compiles these things based on an unmet need. So if someone talks like you guys talk to me in English, so I'm not answering in German. because the need is to respond in English. So my brain switches on the English areas of memory. So that's the same thing what we try to do now. We kind of just try to create a need by giving us a question. And then I just want you and all the listeners to kind of just immerse in that question and try to find an answer to that question. So I create the need and our brain will try to create the answer.
Cool.
And then we basically just, I can tell you what happened in which area in your brain, and then we can perhaps share one of us what we had in mind. Right? So we start with, let's try to find and to remember one of the top three of our memories in life that are associated with family love.
Mm.
Family is not necessarily biological family, can be your pet, can be someone that you feel family. We stay in that moment for 25 to 30 seconds.
So we're looking for peak experiences in that
Peak
domain,
family
right?
love
Yeah,
experience.
exactly. Family love is like,
And then marinate in it for 20 seconds.
yeah. So maybe we just resolve here. Perhaps I take the first example, so just to share one. And I try to keep it short because normally these are so rich that you could talk about 15 minutes about what you hopefully have just seen in your brain. So I remember kind of my second daughter, Lisa, kind of just who always had like a little rabbit toy, and she tended to always lose that thing. So the parents were always kind of just trying to find that thing because she couldn't fall asleep without it. And I remember that one day she put that rabbit thing in the diaper trash, and we found it after a while. So that's kind of just my memory for that. And I just see exactly how she realized that the diaper and her rabbit are same size, and she just used the diaper garbage for her rabbit. So now what happened is we have kind of just opened an area that normally is silent because there was no need for family love right now, right? So it's like this is the areas mainly at my side is mainly on over the right ear. That's where it's firing right now, and actually most of you as well. We have no data that there's anyone who is not firing over the right ear right now. So that's kind of the
And,
second thing.
and of course, there's an experience of warm, like thinking about my boys, play
Mhm.
fighting with them. It was just like this big smile and this warm gush of
Mhm.
feeling.
Yeah, so it would have been so interesting to see the faces of the people now listening because even your face normally tells a language, and normally you don't have an open mouth. Your mouth is normally shut. Normally your eyes are not necessarily closed, can be closed, but not necessarily. We'll get to this because these neurotransmitters also actually activate the muscles of our face, so we can communicate with our smile how we feel. So family love is dopamine and oxytocin. So let's kind of just move to a younger emotion that is contentment. Contentment is built out of oxytocin, cannabinoids, and dopamine. These are moments where you feel embraced by nature. That's where the oxytocin component comes, but where you are alone. So you're not with people, you're not talking. So, in a way, I would like you to find one of the top two memories where you were in nature and had a moment of awe and contentment. Yeah, so maybe Tasha, Jeff, one of you, if you have one memory, no issue if you couldn't catch one because we are kind of already pros with 25 seconds to grab these. It's not so simple sometimes.
Yeah, for me, I chose to like you asked. Jeff and I are both nature people, so I think that was easier for us. But an old one is that my family used to spend our summers camping by Lake Huron, and there's all these cliff sides, and it's some of the most beautiful sunsets in the world. And so even when I was a little kid, I used to just at sunset time, I would go run for the cliff and watch it, and it just has this feeling of awe. And then a more recent one was at the Dharma Center of Canada, where I do a annual retreat. There's just like this area that I like to go by myself, and it's like this magical walkway of just like natural arch greenery, and the floor is all moss, so it feels like you're walking in this fairyland. And so I always sneak off during retreat and walk through there. And as I was thinking of those ideas or those memories, I was just paying attention to how different that feeling was experientially in my body, from the familial love we were just feeling. I feel like when I was thinking of family love, there was, I had a big smile on my face, and it felt really like heady, warm, like you said. And this one was much more deeper in the body and felt more
Mm.
like, I don't know,
Peaceful.
reverential and peaceful. Yeah. Like I wasn't really smiling, but there was a sense of peace. It was very different, even just, physically, experientially in the body.
It's great. I can even share one thing because I can see you on video, right? So the interesting thing is that in the beginning, both of your eyes were not completely closed, but at the end, you kind of just saw that complete relaxation. Because normally closing your eyes is a strong indicator for opioids or endorphins because they help you to close your eyes, right? So in a way, when you think about the classical pleasure situations, your favorite food that you just eat, you normally you indulge into that. For me, when the bass drops at the music, your eyes go closed.
Yes.
Base.
Orgasmic
Yeah.
Yeah.
pleasure. So you see, the closing eyes means most probably in these memories there were also a level of gratitude because gratitude has an opioid component. So therefore, perhaps it was not a pure contentment, but I think it definitely was very close. And that's actually the whole discussion. Literally, what is actually contentment really compiling? Because I think gratitude is very close. So that's kind of just perhaps the next try that we do is let's go to something that really makes us grateful. Now, there are two things to that. One is when you had some negativity, like you were anxious about someone getting lost and that person came back. What I actually would like to have is not these that were like a relief. I would rather like to have something that is the deepest things you are grateful about. And let's just see whether you find, again, one of the top three for 20-25 seconds. And then we can talk about the science behind and why this is tricky.
Okay.
Okay. So Jeff,
Yeah. Um,
did,
Interesting.
did you find one?
Yeah, definitely. First I went immediately to my picturing my second son when he was born, but I think that was very oxytocin. It was wonderful. I felt a lot of gratitude, but then I shifted over to this very common experience I have when I'm meditating, which is I'm in a group. If I'm meditating at a retreat, and I open my eyes, and I just look out over all the people with their eyes closed, and it's hard to explain. It's just this sense of the incredible gift that I get to do this in this life, and the intimacy I feel with the people there, and the vulnerability, and with the larger sense of being that somehow I'm being cared for by this moment, and it's like a spiritual feeling. And it's very much the gratitude flavor is very strong, and it's wonderful. It's so heart filling. That's where I went.
It's really hard because the things that we're grateful for are things that are related to family and friendship and
Yeah.
everything else. So you feel those tinges of the other emotion, like it's, this murky
Yeah.
ground. Because the same thing, I found gratefulness as related to people, and actually the same people I was thinking about when we were doing the family stuff. But quality is a little bit different when you're focusing on the gratitude portion of it.
Yeah, like the
It's
gratitude, the existential gratitude for life thing felt.
Yeah.
like its own almost. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sense.
But what you just mentioned, I think, is the strongest benefit also of just meditation as such, right? Kind of you are by the techniques we are trying to activate exactly these regions. They are basically a little bit further in the back, a little bit more inside. And we know that because the professors and the institutions that also did our studies were actually kind of examining meditating monks in the MRI. So they knew, interestingly already, oh, under meditation, they can kind of just move around and activate certain areas extremely effectively. The, the interesting thing is that what we have just done, at least in the MRI, and it would be amazing to have you, Jeff, in the MRI meditating. But I think what we have found is that kind of the recall of your best memories are actually at least as strongly activating your brain than deep meditation.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And it's interesting, it's similar regions, but it's also different regions. And we keep one that is definitely not in meditation, kind of very active. But I think that is in a way that the whole thing, the meditation piece is interestingly going to our youngest structures in the brain. So it's almost like as if meditation is something that we high up in the hierarchy of life have just been able to develop. So it feels that is something that we are special for. So I think that's kind of just interesting. Now, perhaps before we can just go to the last one that I have in mind, and we can go on forever. Right? Is like the funny thing is that from the hypotheses, the neurotransmitters projected currently involved in gratitude are identical to pleasure. However, from an experience perspective, I would say it's completely different. And actually it is. Right? So you see, sometimes science hypotheses is not finished yet. So we just don't know exactly what is the difference between gratitude and pleasure. From a brain structure, I can only tell you that it looks completely different from which areas in the brain are active. So if we kind of just go on our brain areas, so we had the oxytocin right above our right ear, right? Then we moved into the back where the cannabinoids are and a little bit of oxytocin. Then we kind of just went broader and more in front where we have basically seen the activation for the opioids or endorphins. So I think most powerful memories indeed, because they are so rudimentary, are the best moments of sexual desire. So you can imagine, because from a pure reproductive perspective, is like, I mean, this is like, this was just a moment never to forget. So so I think on that one we give ourselves 30 seconds. I join, and then we can more or less decide who is sharing how much. I mean, in order to perhaps avoid any trouble in any relation, let's kind of just look at something recent instead of some very old things.
Yeah.
So,
Foreigners watch this episode and they're like, hey.
exactly. What
Of course, I only have desire now for my wife. No problem.
Exactly. So and you see, this is exactly why normally when we do these exercises, you don't share in public, right? Because you are with yourself, so you can be totally honest. Here
We're
we'll
exhibitionists
just
here.
see. Exactly. Okay, so let's go for these
20
25.
seconds.
Okay,
Like a
so-
sex desire meditation.
So we're focusing on a peak experience of sexual desire or sexual
Desire.
Okay, desire.
Not
Like, so
No, it's
not
desire.
woman.
Exactly. It's the lust, not
Lust. Okay.
the.
Right.
So the completion is actually the pleasure.
Yes.
And interestingly, the opioids block the testosterone almost like. So it's like we look on the thing what happens before.
Because the lust is the motivator. That's what it's
Yes.
what gets us
So that's mixed,
running
Very
after our
Yeah, exactly.
sexual
Yeah.
interest in the wild.
Yeah.
mixed with the dopamine. Got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, let's go.
This is hilarious.
I think we stop it here. Otherwise, we're going to just.
I was really enjoying
We are losing it. We are losing it.
See you later, guys. I gotta go.
I have to move now.
I think when you said earlier, "drop the bass," it got me thinking about the electronic music scene and some of the sexy things I've seen in the clubbing world. Because that's
Yeah.
That's where you went? That's when
I
you met
kind of
with him?
went to like some encounters in that world that were along the lines that Axel set us up.
So I take one because it's really beautiful because like just 2 days ago, and that is seeing my partner with her jumpsuit on a party from behind and thinking, shit, this lady looks good, and then realizing it's my partner.
Nice.
That was really good. That was really good, and it's the best story to tell here, right? So that's good.
You get bonus points for telling
And,
the
and so it's like triple bonus because it's a true story and it really happened recently. It was just great. Yeah.
nice.
So what did we learn from that then? What parts? So different part of our brains lit up.
I- In a way, what we try to advocate for is these activations drive the buildup of neurons and interconnectivity called neuroplasticity. It is well known that the more dense your brains are, in particular in the cortical areas, the more resistant or resilient you are against mental disease. That's one. And the second thing is people who have been checked, like being very old and having a kind of reporting themselves happy and having no signs of dementia, have in these areas really kind of very high density. So what we try to do is like give you something enjoyable right now. And because we know the neurons are firing there, we almost train your neuroplasticity muscle in the brain to kind of just work on your long-term memory. That's a kind of long-term memory and long-term happiness. That's in a way the translation from the molecules to the memory recall to kind of the brain substance that we increase. We actually did a quite difficult exercise, right? Because to do these recalls on a video without a so-called memory anchor, like a photo, right? As an example, what Apple does, kind of showing you some pictures or kind of just Google, and is like actually doing nothing else but just randomly. They don't know what you miss. They just show you something from your photo roll and hope that it triggers a memory. But in a way, we just try to use that systematically. When we see this person didn't have a good memory in that area, we resurface things that are just matching these missing emotions. So that's actually the entire idea. Is almost like be proud on your be proud on your good memories and have a look at them and enjoy them by just immersing into them.
Using your own memories to fertilize your
Yeah.
cortex.
And but presumably not just, I mean, because the program for happiness that you're trying to articulate here, I mean, the context is that as a culture, we only we seed certain kinds of memories that we have priority around, and or we have priorities in the way where we're going to make money, we're going to be successful. But for real happiness, we need to have a much more well-rounded view of this. So it's not just that you're going to bring the memories of all the different ways you've been happy. It's that learning from those memories to make sure that you have more of those kinds of experiences in the future, that you are going to fill your life with experiences that will give you gratitude, that will give you friend connection, that will give you family time, all those kinds of things,
Like
presumably.
diversifying
Yeah.
Yeah.
your happiness diet.
In a way, the idea was that we felt and actually we could measure the almost like quantify the quality of a peak memory, right? Because you could measure the whole brain activity in totality, what it actually brings, right? So so if you want, it's almost like a new real biological currency because all of a sudden you realize what your brain really estimated as important for you and what kind of you just should do more of or try to top. And it's interesting that the elements of pride, right? What we try to achieve with a lot of our time in our current life, right? Kind of making money, kind of just showing off, having a lot of status symbols, all these things are not really triggering a lot of activity up there. That was I think a very interesting one. The areas that are really most supportive in driving the neuroplasticity and actually make you feel good based on our data is actually really the friendship and family areas. Or to be precise, the cannabinoid and oxytocin, because remember oxytocin you can also get from contentment. So you don't need the family. You can immerse with nature and you get that molecule. And cannabinoids can come from friends or from nature. It's also in laughter, right? So in a way, you have the brain has
Mhm.
doesn't need friends to get cannabinoids. That's, I think, is a key thing. You can vary how to fill up your 6 buckets of neurotransmitters.
Something really interesting as you're talking about this that is really affirming for different meditative practices because in my lineage in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition there's actually we call it an antidote for depression, and it's empathetic joy. Right? So, in a very simple way,
Mudita.
you can go to the park and watch other people enjoying themselves in a real like and try to be like as there's a practicing part of it where it feels kind of performative and you're not actually happy for them yet. But the more you rinse and repeat and almost kind of like mirroring other people's joy or being happy that they're joyful, it's you're training yourself out of depression. And it's so cool that this has a verifiable kind of basis.
So interesting. I haven't heard that, and actually, I can even add to that. So in my personal data is the best example. So interestingly, my top 15 memories from just total uh, peak activity in the brain have all to do with things where I contributed to someone else's happiness.
Yeah.
So funnily, the competitive, egocentric ones do not rank under the top 25. So, but you see, what you're just saying is like this spread of positivity that these people observe in the park is exactly this, right? So so we have something that I love as a scientist. Science cannot explain. There is a transportation of positivity between humans that simply works.
I was gonna say, and another practice that it reminds me of is in non-dual practice. There's a lot of meditations that are based on eroding the sense of like a separate self over here and you over here, and it's like feeling with the compassion kind of meditations, or just this kind of boundary eroding meditations, and they're also there for breaking down this sense of isolation and depression. And the way that they do it is essentially by mimicking family and community in your own system. So you can get those feelings of having been with friends or with family just because you have the
Totally.
sense of not ever being separate from other people.
Yeah.
So you're kind of taking the back door to it.
And in fact, feeling more intimate with everything.
Yeah, with everything.
And
Yes,
what
exactly.
spontaneously emerges is that sense of connection and gratitude and a kind of spontaneous
Mm,
unfolding of generosity and compassion. That is, you can train those things separately, but they also just spontaneously appear when you erode those boundaries
yeah.
and let yourself just
Yeah,
experience
yeah.
your picture.
I think the phenomenal thing is that there are so many different roads that actually come to somehow the same context. I'm just using the molecule names in a way, right? Kind of just like trying to get to that source code because that was important for me in my journey. Right? But I think everything that people have somehow learned from trial and error are totally valid and kind of just make total sense. And there's actually not even a reason to debate this, right? Because whatever works for you, it's an individual thing. Whatever works for you is right for you. Mm.
Exactly.
The molecules might be the same, but how you get to activate them is personal as you can imagine. And I mean, you didn't see my partner in her jumpsuit. That's a trigger for me. It's
I
not
can
for
have
you.
empathetic joy for you that you have a
Exactly.
partner
Yes.
with such
Well,
a
that
nice
I
lucky
can't have
me.
empathetic joy for Kosh who's having empathetic joy for you
Yeah.
watching your partner in a jumpsuit.
So there's 3 people here happy that your partner has a nice mind.
Okay, so but I want to
Exactly.
say, but Axel, it's really, really, really valuable what you're doing because you have this from a quantitative perspective. Because it's like, I mean, science is the explanatory framework that has the most power in our culture. So it's very, very, very compelling, and it gives people want to know, they want to feel like it's been verified, and so to be able to present a paradigm in this way. So you do have ideas around how to kind of get this out there, and presumably also around like what you've learned about happiness. Like, how do you take those results and help people then find a more well-rounded view of happiness? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
But perhaps before I answer the question, one little thing that for me was always so important in this whole journey, because we tend to kind of love to believe in wearables, I think, and just hard scientific data. But I think the message here is the following: our brain molecules, we don't understand. our brain translated them for us into emotions. And if we learn how to listen to those, we have the best lighthouse that we can get. So in a way that the whole science craziness is only because we don't listen to our emotions. And so in a way this but I think you're right. It's like we are just very much believing into the science, even though we have the best wearable up here. I mean, this is amazing. It's amazing. So what we try to do actually is just try to get people in that loop at least once a day to think about what was good today. What is a memory I would like to recall that I can maybe look at in 4 weeks when I have forgotten it. And the funny thing is, it's like these small things, like 15 minutes, a text message you get that you never recalled anywhere. It's not the big things, it's these small things. And by kind of just helping you to populate your memory vault, that's how we call it in Matter, you can imagine you have a database of good moments that you have rated based on your emotions you have experienced. That means you have an own guide. Whenever you miss something, you can just say, hey, please show me. I need oxytocin. And you just click oxytocin, you get like a show of good oxytocin moments where for sure you have forgotten 99% of it. Because your brain, in the beginning, is not a photo album. So in a way like your own personal drug box that you can kind of switch on. And hopefully, after a while, when you're kind of using this method regularly, the algorithm that is behind that is actually smarter than you, right? Because if you have 2 weeks not seen your kids, it knows already after 7 days, oh, the guy goes down on oxytocin. So before you even experience it, because you're compensating with more work, more sports, and just you, of course, the body tries to compensate for brain activity with other means. On a molecular level, you have an intelligence that gives you a hint what to do, almost like stepping in after 3, 4 days. And that's actually the whole thing. It's more like educating people how to build their neuroplasticity, because we know when you do that, you live longer, happier, and healthier. And that's the whole try.
So your main practice suggestion then is at the end of the day, take some time, in a sense, almost a kind of gratitude journal to think about what happened today, to kind of savor and a particular memory to help lock it in the data bank. And the more you do that, the more you fill your those networks with those kinds of positively valenced memories that line up along these different neurotransmitters, the more that becomes. And by the way, this is exactly how Buddhists think about the idea of practice. You know, you're planting seeds, inclining the mind towards gladness, inclining the mind to come back to the present. The more you do that, the more you create causes of conditions for more happiness and less suffering until you change the ratio.
100%. So you see, all these things are exactly totally supported on what I do on the 6 small molecule ones, even bigger. The point is, instead of like a journaling app where you really have to write down everything, what I believe, I don't have the real data, is that our brain has a much better movie of the memory than we think. So I don't have to write everything down. I actually just need a key to open it. Like um a photo that just opens that door is enough, because our brain has much more information than we actually think. So the journaling is exactly this, and it's almost like a single photo journal with a emotional rating scientific twist. That's all.
Do you know what this reminds me of? It's so funny. When I was a kid, from when I was like small all through high school, there was this series of books that I really liked, and they were called, I can't remember. The main character's name was Cam Jansen. And she had some special ability where if she saw something, she could look at it and she would say, click, like a camera. And she would keep a picture of it in her mind. And so she, she's like this kid detective. And so she's using it to solve crimes or whatever. But I used to love it. And I started doing it. So when if I was around something that I really loved, I would look at it. I wouldn't say click, but I would be like, remember this. And so I have this whole database. People are always like, why do you remember your childhood so much? But I have this whole database
Wow.
of really visual memories. Like my favorite one is I remember being in my backyard when I was a kid and there was a full moon and it was just like the most spectacular full moon I'd ever seen. And I was standing there looking at it and I was like, remember this. So I used to do that all the time, especially in nature. And now I have this database of like, you know, good
Maybe we're such a positive
neurotransmitters.
person.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't realize, but
But it's funny, right? It's funny that kind of just now comes the memory with the full moon. What is contentment? Because we have opened this a couple of minutes ago. Right? See, this is the whole thing. So if you have much more of these, that is fitting for sure pride, because we were proud
well,
on
for
you
sure.
being
Yeah.
Cam Jensen. That's it. Yeah.
So, well, what a pleasure to be able to chat with you about this, Axel. It's fascinating, this work. Just curious as a last question. I mean, anything else that you want to share with us, but and also, how do you get it out there? Like, what is the platform or the forum that can help people connect to this? I mean, you must have ideas around applications. Anything you want to share about us on that?
Yeah, indeed. What happened after the clinical study was that we had in parallel asked Happiness Research Institute to give us a questionnaire in order to kind of monitor whether these people really subjectively feel better, only during the period of the 4 or 5 months of study. And the data was so much better that actually the whole company said, we hang on a second. We designed like a research app for a study, and that research app that is lousy kind of just makes people happier. I mean, is that not actually what we should just launch? And in a way, that's what we did, right? So we kind of just did a light touch on classical UI UX. I think the app can still do better, and kind of in a way, we launched it on the App Store. So you can basically start building your own memory vault and kind of just seeing how the areas in your brain kind of just get richer. So we kind of use the data from the study as an orientation, as an inspiration on how your brain looks. So it's a little like brain simulator in that. And that's kind of just that's kind of the app.
what's
Really,
it
I
called?
didn't even realize that you had an app. What's the name of it?
It's actually just called Matter. You find it on Matter Neuroscience. It's basically just on the App Store.
Matter.
I
It's
think
called
so.
Matter Neuroscience.
Matter, like gray matter, right? So,
Okay,
Matter,
yeah.
just
Matter
Matter.
Neuroscience.
Okay.
Okay, we'll link it in,
We'll
Not-
in there.
in the episode for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And hey, that was fun with you. That's, I think, the key message for the end.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Put some new memories together.
And you see the most important thing I have to do, because that is the weakness of the app. I have to take a photo. Otherwise, I can't record it as a memory tonight.
Cool.
So-
I mean, we're all taking photos all the time anyway. Why not use an app to help?
but normally, normally you would not disrupt this laughter. So I have to explain why I take a photo of you, because what is this guy doing? But in a way, that's the memory anchor. That's the memory anchor for the future.
I realize you're the person to ask about this. There's a continual debate happening between my partner, Sarah, and I. She's like, we should take a picture of it. I'm like, I don't want to take a picture. I just want to have an experience, because I want to remember the experience. However, when we take a picture, then I really remember the experience. So she is totally right. So there is something about actually taking the time to get a picture, just to be as you said, a handle or an anchor for the future.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. And let's kind of just, for tonight, you think about the most fun memory that made you laugh the most in your life, and then you have a good night's sleep. That's a good thing.
That's so wonderful. What a great takeaway.
Rinse, repeat.
Rinse, repeat every day. Think about
you.
Axel's partner's nice
Jumpsuit.
butt in a jumpsuit.
Maybe it was her, maybe it was her shoulder blade.
My mind is immediately the one to the butt. That's what I
I
was
was thinking ankles. Like, that is a fabulous set of ankles.
And now, join us for the after party at mindbodpod.com, where me and Jeff talk candidly about whatever didn't get said in this week's episode, and chat in the comments with the whole MindBod squad. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week, and if you want to support our crazy adventures, consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack at mindbodpod.com. See you there.